Dr. Silvio Torres-Saillant to be the keynote speaker of the 17th Annual Conference on Dominican Affairs. Welcome, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to address this impressive gathering of distinguished guests who come from near and far to this 17th Annual Conference on Dominican Affairs, hosted by the National Dominican American Council and the Institute for Latino Studies, Research and Development. Council Chairman Nestor Montilla Sr. and Institute President Maria Teresa Montilla have done me a great honor by asking me to share some thoughts with you as a keynote speaker. I'd like to begin by expressing appreciation for the work that Nestor and Maria Teresa have done over the years for people of Dominican descent in the United States. Through the Council, the Institute, and the Dominican American National Roundtable, they have contributed enormously to making Dominicans part of the nationwide discourse on the future of this country and our place in it as agents of change. It seems to me clear that many of the gains we have made on the electoral market and the rise of many of our co-ethnics to positions of prominence in the municipal, state, and federal spheres of government have benefited from the measure of devotion that they have invested in creating fora of various sorts to advance a dialogue that expands our view of what is politically possible for us as an ethnic community. So I ask for them a warm round of applause. And among other things, Nestor has established himself as a bona fide historian of Dominicans in public life, unearthing the story of Arthur O. Eve, a retired lawmaker whom we now regard as pioneering the Dominican presence in the New York State legislature, having been elected to the Assembly in 1966 and serving for 36 consecutive and productive years. As a scholar, I deeply appreciate Nestor's good efforts to help us complete the story of our presence on this country's political arena. Indeed, establishing the longevity of a Dominican presence in the various walks of life in U.S. society has long been a key component of our advocacy as a community, given that in this country, where minority groups often find themselves competing for attention to their social plight, historical longevity can serve as political credentials. Assuming them to have come to the United States just the other day as birds of passage with no intention to set down roots in this country, which meant that they couldn't possibly have acquired U.S. citizenship, a legislature, until quite recently, could ignore the needs of the Dominican residents in his or her own districts. The thought was that since their presence, numerical presence, did not translate into votes that could affect the public officials' bid for re-election, it just didn't matter that they were there. As a result, the Dominican Studies Institute, among other initiatives, has long committed to an agenda of changing the narrative of our recency by disseminating information about how long the community has been around and how significant their political participation as citizens has been for a long time. Despite the Dominican Institute's efforts, until just a while ago, the narrative of our being the new kid on the block could still be heard, reverberating from the voices of well-known characters in the media. As recently as 2010, For instance, Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez, as principal narrator of the 2010 documentary film Nueva York, a film on the history of the city's relationship to the Hispanic world, emphatically abbreviated the story of Dominicans in this country. There, he said categorically, and I quote, "There was virtually no Dominican migration to the United States until the 1950s. None, with that emphasis. But once Trujillo was assassinated in 1961, and then, of course, after the US invasion of 1965, suddenly, then thousands of Dominicans came to the United States," end of quote. Ironically, Gonzalez's self-assured affirmation came in a documentary produced as a companion to an exhibition whose very title ought to have given him pause. Presented as a collaboration between the New York Historical Society and the Museo del Barrio, the show was called Nueva York, 1613 through 1945, with 1613 referring to the year, the arrival year of the very first non-Native American settler of the territory that would later become New York, predating the arrival of the Dutch and the English, who would come much later. The irony lies in the fact that that first settler happened to be a free mulatto from Santo Domingo named Juan Rodriguez, born in Hispaniola to a Portuguese sailor and an African woman. You probably all know by now that as a result of the research conducted and disseminated by the Dominican Institute under the leadership of Dr. Ramona Hernandez, with key support from Dominican members of the City Council in New York City, now a stretch of Broadway from 159th through 218th Street in Manhattan bears the name Juan Rodriguez Way. The Dominican Institute wisely seized upon the opportunity to make the story of Juan Rodriguez widely known precisely because it saw it as a symbolic weapon to use against the narrative of recency that often plagued conversations about Dominicans in the United States. It actually seems prescient that New York City should have become, after Juan Rodriguez, the primary destination for people coming from the Dominican Republic to the United States. Juan Rodriguez was important as reinforcement to those fighting the narrative that shortens the length of the Dominican experience on the land, and that incorrectly abbreviates a history that goes back at least to the mid-19th century. There is political significance in the kind of history that one can claim in this country. History is not neutral in this country. The concern over the tale of recency corresponds to the well-founded fear that allowing it to persist could have deleterious consequences on the community's advancement. If the notion that the community consists of quintessential newcomers who have not yet paid enough dues, if that narrative persists, it could follow that we may be deemed ineligible for seeking equal empowerment, right? The idea is, you just came the other day. We've been here for a long time. Get in line, wait your turn. And what we are saying is that the order, that the calculation that has been made to determine who should be on the line and who should be in the back of the line and who should be up front is wrong and has to be corrected. In the struggle for equality in this country and in the competition for resources, and later on I'll try to say a bit about ways of circumventing the drama of competition through building alliances. But in the drama of competition and demanding attention, seniority confers credentials. and we need to to remain mindful of that. In the late 1990s, when migration studies began to gravitate toward an increasing emphasis on transnationalism, which emphasized, classical migration studies focused on people leaving from a land of origin and arriving at a land of destination, and then following what they were doing before, and then what kind of life they built after that. Then came a paradigm shift in the scholarship on migration, and the focus began to be placed on the mobility, the back and forth mobility between, so the idea was that there was no longer a land of origin and a land of destination, but actually a circularity that meant that people would simply kept running around. And we thought that too was dangerous as a paradigm to use to explain the Dominican experience, because it turned out that quite often the Dominican case would be used as the paradigmatic case. It would be used as the most exemplary case illustrating this new sort of development in the history of migration. And I remember a New York Times article which showed the case of this young man, Mateo, the entrepreneur who does finance, what's his name? Fernando Mateo. Fernando Mateo was displayed on this very long article in the New York Times, showing that Mateo was able to have breakfast. He was able to have breakfast in his rural hometown where he was born, and then have dinner, back home in his home, and so on and so forth, and still have time to make another trip elsewhere. And we thought that what that did was it again militated against our commitment to growing roots and building community in the United States, the land of arrival. So we wanted to resist this new sort of emphasis on circularity. Yeah. Because we thought that if we are seen as not being here, but being sort of between here and there all the time, we would not be taken politically seriously. Now, Dominican scholars have played a significant role in sort of producing the narrative that to some extent has helped to sort of articulate the level of activism, the level of participation, the level of productivity, creativity of the Dominican community as a whole. And if you go to the work of Daisy Coco de Felipis, Franklin Gutierrez, a number of our young scholars of different generations, you see an emphasis on Dominicans as people who are rooted in the North American soil. Yeah, even while they have a high regard for their ancestral homelands, for their heritage, and for their ethnic origins. Yeah. There's also another element that we thought important to consider. Dominicans can be easily described by another paradigm that is now being used in the academy to describe mobility. Not that of transnationalism. We didn't accept that. We didn't accept the idea that we are between here and there. We wanted to make the case that we were here, and that there was simply a source of energy, a source of self-recognition, a way of placing ourselves in the United States vis-a-vis other populations that also have a kind of elsewhere to refer to. Yeah. At the start of the 21st century, Dominicans headed the list of groups having the largest share of what sociologist Nancy Forner has called the new great wave of immigration to New York City, for instance. An influx that began in the 1960s in a massive sense, even though the Dominican presence was already here. You probably know that the great Dominican scholar Pedro Enrique Sureña began his higher education in New York City. Yeah. You also let me skip some details so as not to make my presentation longer than it needs to be. At the end of the 21st century, in the first decade, for instance, we could see significant manifestations of the rise of Dominicans in the United States. Just think of some of the public figures, people who are visible. Avatars, Zoe Saldaña, the Passaic-born daughter of Dominican immigrant Aridio Saldaña, reigned as an up-and-coming Hollywood star. At the time, up-and-coming, now hugely in the realm of stardom. You should know that the Puerto Rican composer, musician and composer Lin-Manuel Miranda, who has now become spectacular, whose fame has become spectacular as a result of the success of his latest plays, Hamilton, actually had his first major break by doing a play that represented the experience of Washington Heights, right? With all the Dominican energy that it can boast as a result of that Dominican presence, and the music is there to show for it. Yeah. So it is to me significant that he should pick that side. Yeah. And it also significant to me that side and the play that came out of that, if you may recall, it's called In the Heights. Yeah. The play that came out of that became a national, international sensation, making it possible for them to venture into what is now his latest and greatest hit, which is the play Hamilton. The fiction writer Junot Diaz, a native of the Dominican Republic who grew up with his immigrant mother in New Jersey, earned the 2008 Pulitzer Prize in fiction, and after that has received greater honors. He has higher honors than any young writer that I know of, and not only young writer. I actually think that except for people who have received the Nobel Prize in literature, he is the most highly awarded American writer today. Yeah? In 2007, since I'm speaking about the first decade of the 21st century, Alex Rodriguez, the New York-born child of Dominican parents, signed a contract with the New York Yankees that made him the highest paid player in baseball history. Yeah? And if we move to the political arena, who am happy to receive the lists that Dominican American National Roundtable sends often at the beginning of after elections, when new members get elected to the state and municipal governments and legislatures. If you look at those lists that we receive regularly from the Dominican American National Roundtable, you'll see that we really have gotten there to a large extent. And with the latest development, with the arrival of Congressman Adriano Espaillat in the U.S. Capitol, I think we can say that what we have achieved has not been little. Yeah? However, by the end of the same decade, one could find Dominicans in high places throughout American society at the same time as we could find indicators that are quite sad. The less favorable characteristics of the incorporation of Dominicans into the fabrics of the cities across the country leave a lot to be desired. And the whole socioeconomic indicators show that Dominicans have done poorly as compared to other groups. They have often found themselves clustered in low-level service and manufacturing jobs, and even professionals with high levels of schooling at the time of immigration have often suffered serious social declines, typically unable to obtain employment in the field of their credentials, which is a topic that was addressed earlier today here, and I was able to get the final tail of it. Dominican women who frequently took the lead in the decision to pursue emigration have outnumbered men in moving to the United States. In 2010, among the Dominican foreign-born, there were 71 men for every 100 women, counting specifically in the city of New York. These numbers are very difficult to do nationwide, so you have to pick particular sites. In terms of gender relations, women generally appear to have enhanced their position in the family as a result of migration to the United States, but given the high proportion of female-headed households, which from an economic viewpoint are at a disadvantage, the gender gain does not seem to have translated into much material advancement. And this is, I think, an important indicator of something that appears to be significant at a socio-cultural level, beneficial, because it shows the leadership of women, but in a patriarchal society, that in of itself means that that they are gaining less than if the men were actually in those same positions, because of all that you know about the glass ceiling inequality, gender inequality in this country. Now, I am very interested in the notion of diaspora, and this is taking me a little bit closer to what I would like to share with you concerning the vision of the vision of the future for the Dominicans in the years to come, especially after the arrival of a Dominican in the U.S. Capitol. Think of this as a conversation. It is crucial for people who inhabit diasporic spaces in American society. The term diaspora is a term that we borrow from the Jewish experience and from the experience of Africans who left and populated many parts of the world as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. In the case of the Jews, in the biblical exile that you know of, and then if you recall, so those people are referred to as diasporic peoples in the sense that they are connected to their roots, that they are spread all over the world, while at the same time having a sense of recognition as a result of a particular connection to the point of origin. So Dominicans, you have Dominicans in Europe, you have Dominicans in the United States, you have Dominicans throughout the United States, of course, in many parts in Latin America. So Dominicans can be seen as a diaspora. So people of the Caribbean, in general, tend to be seen as diasporic peoples. Yeah. Those people who are members of diaspora, and they tend to be called so because of a particular relation to a land of origin. Yeah, they tend to have a particular way of configuring, of organizing their sense of identity. They rarely let go of their roots. Yeah, but that does not mean that they are not active citizens, active participants in the societies where they reside or where they may be born. Right? So, for instance, Julia Alvarez, the famous Dominican American novelist, fiction writer, and poet, yeah, she is born in the United States. She is a writer of Dominican descent, but she is connected by sentiment to her native land, to the ancestral homeland. She is a person who would not consider the Dominican Republic as a place to return to. That's different. So people in diasporas are just Americans who are diasporic peoples. They are regular Americans with a difference. The difference is that there's a place in the world that they care much about. Yeah. So that if you think of that concept and you apply it to Dominicans in the United States, and you think of it as if you think of them in terms of the political space, the political arena, yeah, you'll understand, for instance, why quite often when a Dominican American gets elected to a position of significance, one of the first things they do is travel back to their parents' hometown back in the Dominican Republic. Yeah, even though their power has no effect over there. And even though, it's something very curious, right? It's something very, very curious. I saw that. I mean, they go to meet with the president over there, to meet with dignitaries and so on and so forth. There's something good about that, and there's something bad about that. Yeah? And I'd like to say a bit about both. So, it is crucial for people who inhabit diasporic spaces in American society, such as a good many of the people that we know in public office, to become aware of the burden and the privilege of their location. When you are somebody like Adriano Espaillat, you have, in a sense, two countries to care about. Yeah? He is very much an American citizen. His power is effective in U.S. policy, U.S. governance only. Yeah? However, there's no way that you can extricate from him an interest in what's happening in the Dominican Republic. That is good and that is bad. It is good if you accept what I believe diasporic citizenship should be, which is, when you are a diasporic citizen, you accept that you have a responsibility to fix two societies instead of one. Most citizens have a responsibility to fix one society. Yeah? If you understand that citizenship is not just a set of documentary credentials that enable you to vote, yeah, or to have a passport issued, yeah. If you understand that citizenship is more than that, but it's actually a way of inhabiting your national reality, yeah. That in fact being a citizen means that you accept the responsibility of holding the authorities accountable for the well-being, for the public good, yeah, and for the well-being of the nation, yeah. Then you can imagine what then being a diasporic citizen means, because then that same responsibility is double. Yeah? However, there's also another trick. It could very well happen that you choose to be a citizen in the United States. If you are, let's say, Guillermo Linares, if you are one of the other representatives present here today, you could be a citizen in the U.S., but not a citizen back home, back in the ancestral homeland. So in the ancestral homeland, you go back there only to refresh culturally, yeah, and to enjoy the abuelita's habichuela con dulce, yeah. But then you turn off your political eye when you go back there. Yeah? And the atrocities that you see the government committing there, you somehow manage to tolerate them because you regard yourself as political here. Yeah? So the same things that you would fight against here, you simply, tolerate there because that's not what you go to do there. Huh? There's a serious problem with that. That means that as a diasporic citizen, you are defaulting on one half of your responsibility. Yeah? But not only that, since you are in a position of power, there is a way in which you are colluding with the atrocities that you enable, that you allow to continue to happen in the ancestral homeland. Yeah? So I'd like to put that on the table. You may have received your education as well as your overall socialization in the United States, while the Dominican Republic remains relevant. While you belong in the United States, the land of your civic loyalty, you'll find that your ancestral background, your ties to the lands of your forebears, will seem inescapable as you endeavor to chart your path within the contours of Americanness. Your background will shape the kind of American that you can become. That means that you will never be able to take your citizenship and belonging for granted, which puts you in an uncomfortable position existentially, but that creates in you a state of ongoing salutary alertness, civically speaking. Yeah? So it is possible that that uncomfortable state is the best thing that could possibly happen to you, because it is the thing that will keep you from defaulting on your responsibility or from being disdainful or indifferent. Yeah? Your connection to more than one society puts a greater burden on your moral shoulders than non-diasporic citizens carry. You have more than one society in which to advocate for justice, inclusion, and equality. The challenge for diasporic citizens is not to succumb to the illusion that one of the societies that form part of their compound heritage is better or more humane than the other. Societies, each in their own ways, tend to be equally good or equally bad, both requiring the urgent participation of concerned citizens committed to humanizing it. If I had to define what a citizen is, a citizen is a person who accepts his or her responsibility to make his or her society more truly human. Yeah? The challenge: diasporic citizens must overcome the instinct of people who have received their socialization in any of the technologically developed nations of the world to assume that they can solve the problem. That's another thing. And this is something that comes up in my speaking with Dominican students quite often. Because the first question is, Professor, what can we do for our people back there? Yeah? And I ask them, well, are there no problems in your neighborhood where you live now? Yeah? The struggle can only begin where you are. Can only begin where you are. And then before asking yourself, what can we do about there, why don't you ask, what are the struggles being waged there? Yeah? So that I can see if there's a way that I can support those efforts. And not assume that you can come in a parachute, yeah? And resolve the problem of there, because chances are that if there's injustice, there will also be struggles against injustice, because there's no way that humans will put up with injustice without resistance. Yeah? It is best to start with the working hypothesis that both societies, the first world society and the third world society, are equally in need of correction. Yeah? So I would say, if now that Nestor thinks that it is time for us to bring this to a close, I would say that the goal for the Dominican, this is what I would like to see. I would like to be able to say that when Dominicans went to office, yeah, when they became legislators, they became council members, assembly members, state at the level, at the assembly members, senators at the state as well as the federal government level. Yeah, I would like to be able to say that the United States became a better place as a result of their arrival. Yeah. I am paying those young ladies over there. I'm paying those young ladies there to applaud. So that's what I like to. And to be honest, if that does not happen, if their arrival there does not contribute to helping us enhance the logic of social relations, creating conditions in which we respect one another a little bit better, in which we treat one another a little bit better, in which we abuse one another less across racial lines, across religious differences, yeah, across gender, yeah, that we respect the environment a little bit better, yeah, that we recognize that workers need to be, treated humanely, that there should be no question about raising the minimum wage, yeah. I think that if none of that happens, then perhaps Dominican lawmakers should save themselves the trouble and stay home. So I would like the next leaders to represent Dominican interests, which are mine, but I would like them to do so without isolating themselves from the interests of other groups with whom we are interdependent. Yeah? So I would like benefit, which is not isolationist, which is not segregationist, which is not narrow, because in the end, we are in this together. Yeah? So the Congressional Black Caucus is having trouble accepting, or rather is evaluating whether or not to accept Congressman Adriano Espaillat on the grounds of his insufficient blackness. Well, he is what we might call a mixed race person. But then again, they also hold a grudge against him because apparently he tried to unseat the former Congress member, Charles Rangel. Yeah? Okay, he tried to unseat Charles Rangel after Charles Rangel had been in office for 42 continuous years unchallenged. Yeah? Mostly because he managed to kill the opposition before they were able to qualify to be on the ticket. Yeah? And to challenge a person like that is a sin. And somebody who is not particularly pure himself. Yeah? Nor is he any blacker than Espaillat. Because his papa is Puerto Rican. Right? But also, what are we going to do about a young man named Barack Hussein Obama? Was he not a member? Well, he has a white mother. This is not the time for the Congressional Black Caucus to be engaging in counting blood, right? In measuring blood. This is not the time for the Congressional Black Caucus to be measuring blood, to determine who qualifies, who's blacker than whom. Yeah? We remember that when regimes engaged in measuring ethnicity and race, the consequences were very dire, very sad. You may recall the case in the Third Reich, right? You get your nose measured to determine how un-German you were, yeah? And therefore how eligible for death you were, yeah? On the other hand, Dominicans, we ourselves have our issues, yeah? We too have to become a bit more inclusive and a bit more understanding and respectful of those people who were here before us, yeah? I argue for making sure that we are not subjected to a narrative of recency in which we are told that we just came the other day. Yeah? But I also want to make sure that I respect those who opened doors for me. Without the work that African Americans did, I would not have been this person whom you have the generosity to invite to give a talk to you, yeah? Because the schools were not available to me and so on and so forth. When we were at the head of the Dominican Studies Institute, we opposed this construct, this concoction called Dominican History Month, yeah? We opposed this, yeah? Because we knew that February already had a name, yeah? It honored the heritage of African Americans. It was called Black History Month. This is not something that came from the community. This came from the Dominican Consulate, yeah? And because our legislators then, yeah, were too respectful of Dominican authorities, in the government authorities from the Dominican Republic, they chose to go along with it, yeah? So what are we saying? That we are replacing the Black History Month with Dominican History Month? That we will not acknowledge it? That we're going to compete for that space? Yeah? And how kind is that? Yeah? What is the solidarity in that? We at the Dominican Studies Institute began by, we had a Dominican week, yeah? We had a Dominican week, but since it happened in the last week of February, for the Independence Week, we decided thematically to connect it to Black History Month by sort of focusing on African heritage in the Dominican Republic. Yeah? That's how we did it. But the Consulado beat us because the Consulado did not have the opposition of the legislators. Yeah? So I believe that that is one of the instances in which the alliance between US-based Dominican American legislators allied uncritically with the Dominican government can be a very bad thing. So I want to make, I am afraid of the time when I will not be able to speak the things that I speak, when I condemn the denationalization laws of September 2013, yeah? Because Danilo will get angry, and Danilo will call Adriano Espaillat or call Idanis, yeah? And then I'll get represalia, not from over there, but from my own brothers and sisters here, yeah? Who might even speak with my chancellor to see if there's a way to remove me from the faculty, yeah? That is what I'm afraid of. That is why, because it has happened already, because I know that the Israeli lobby has done it, and because I know that the Dominican government has been advised by people whom we know to follow the model of the Israeli lobby. Yeah? So with that, my friends, right now I feel a sense of critical hope. Yeah? A hope in moderation. I don't know what brother is going to be able to do in the U.S. Capitol. I hope that what he does is something that makes his children and my children proud. Thank you very much. We got you.